Hello and welcome to Algebra II with Mr. Clausen. Today we are going to get started on solving rational equations. And we're going to talk about two particular methods in this video. We're going to talk about how you can solve rational equations using the cross product method. And we're also going to talk about how we can do it using the idea of the least common denominator method. Now, both of these might have particular circumstances where you would want to use one over the other, but really both should be able to work in a number of different scenarios, and we're going to explore those now with a couple different examples. So the main idea here is if you are going to use cross products, what you're trying to do is multiply both sides by the opposite denominator. So a lot of times, I would just write out cross multiplication like this, where you're rewriting this as negative 4, I should say, times x plus 2 is equal to 3 times 5 times x plus 2. And really what you're doing is just multiplying both sides by both denominators so that they all cancel out in the end. And so what you're going to get here once you land this situation and you're multiplying or doing this cross multiplication, you'll get negative 4x minus 8, and then the other side, we need to solve what's in the parentheses first, so we'll just go and do that here. And we'll go 5x plus 10 times 3, and then we'll distribute the 3 accordingly, so make sure you're following those orders of operations. This will give you 15x plus 30 is equal to negative 4x minus 8. And then obviously just isolate for x. So plus 4x, negative 30, negative 30. And then what we'll get as a result is we'll get 19x is equal to negative 38. I like keeping the x as the positive if I have to choose, so that way when this all comes out at the end I get x is equal to negative 2 and I get this nice solution. Now again, we'll apply the same scenario here. So really the idea when we're doing cross multiplication, you can just simply do it like that, but really what you're doing is you're going x squared minus 2 times x minus 4. And we're doing the same thing to both sides. And again, I'm just showing you this from the theoretical perspective here. Of how this works. I don't expect you to write all this out. When cross multiplication does fine, but you'll see that the x minus 4 cancels out, and then all 2 gets multiplied with is the opposite denominator. And same thing here, just all that cancels and you just multiply negative 2 by the opposite denominator. And so we'll get negative 2 times x minus 4, same as you would get with your typical cross multiplication. And then we'll go 2 times x squared minus 2. Right, this 2 is this 2. All right, so let's go and distribute. And we'll go negative 2x plus 8. And we'll get 2x squared minus 4. And so now what I'm going to do here, though, in terms of solving this rational equation, is I'm actually going to move everything to one side and get it equal to 0 and see if I can solve it using the quadratic formula. Because I see I have a quadratic term here, so that I'm going to need to take advantage of that. And I do have a x to the single power, so there would be a b term to the quadratic equation. So I'm going to add 2x and subtract 8 from both sides. So add 2x and minus 8, so then that'll give me 2x squared plus 2x minus 12. And I'm just going to pull a 2 out of this entire thing real quick. And so if I pull a 2 out of all 3 terms, this will give me x squared plus x minus 6 all equals 0. Now, the reason that I do this is you could always apply the quadratic formula here and say, for example, a is equal to 1, b is equal to 1, and c is equal to negative 6. But if I can go and find the factors of negative 6 to be 3 and negative 2, and I take the sum of those, then I see that that is equal to 1, well, I already have my terms. And so what I have is x plus 3 and x minus 2 as the factors that crash out of this. The 2's still there, obviously. But my solutions, based on the zero product property, is that x is equal to either -3 or +2 in this given situation. And so some really quick ways to go and sort through some of this and find some solutions to rational equations using the cross product method. Now, the other method I want to talk a little bit about is the idea of the common denominator method. And the common denominator method just looks at all the denominators and go, what do I need to multiply everything by? What does everything need to have in its denominator so that they all can share the same denominator? And what we see in this situation particularly, and why the cross product method doesn't work, is that we have 1, 2, 3 terms. All right, cross product works really nice if we just have one thing on one side and one thing on another. But when we have this scenario arise, then we have to be a little bit more mindful about how all that pans out. So what I'm going to do in this case is something sort of like cross multiplication. I'm going to find my least common multiple, or my least common denominator. And so what I'm going to do here is, if I say that this is all over 1, and we have x, and x plus 1, and 1, well, the least common denominator is just going to be the multiples of all these terms, all right? And since all of these are technically unique denominators, I'm just going to say 1 times x plus 1. And so the least common denominator in this case, since 1's just a placeholder, we can say it's x times x plus 1. So what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to go and multiply all 3 of these terms by x times x plus 1. Or we could go and write it out as s squared plus x if we wanted to. But I'm actually going to leave it like this, and I'm going to show you why here. So if we go x times x plus 1 times 4 over x. And now whatever I do to one term in this entire equation, I have to do to all 3 terms. And now if I go x times x plus 1 and multiply that to 3 over x plus 1 equals to 1 times x plus 1. Then what I'm going to get is that these x's cancel, this cancels, and so let's distribute that 4 there. I'll get 4x plus 4 minus 3x equals x squared plus x. And now I have a quadratic again. I have this x squared term, so I'm going to just move everything over to the other side. So let's add 3x. Let's subtract 4x. That'll actually all cancel out. Let's subtract 4. So this will equal 0. So we'll get x squared minus 4 all equals 0. This is the difference of squares, so I'll have x minus 2 times x plus 2 all equals 0. So the solutions in this case are x is equal to plus or minus 2. Okay, so hopefully this video just gave you a really quick rundown of some skills that you might already have known, and just applying to the situation where we have rational equations instead of maybe normal mixed fractions and those type of things. So with that said, let's do some math.